Okay, picture this. You walk backstage, and there's a dead wannabe poet. Garlic bulb in one hand, microphone in the other. Throat slashed.
Yeah.
And the very first thing you notice is this incredibly strong smell of garlic. It's a pretty bizarre scene, right?
Extremely bizarre. Yeah. And that's the scene that kicks off this piece by Stefan Pinkwart we're looking at today.
Right, and he uses it to explore this whole idea about texts and truth.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it links up with National Garlic Day in the U.S., which is April 19th.
Perfect timing, then.
Exactly. So at first glance, you might think, okay, tragic accident, maybe. But then there's this handwritten note that just flips everything.
Ah, the note, yes.
It says, I survived everything, just not myself. And then instructions to read his last Slam piece, which he'd set up as a mirror.
Wow. Okay, that immediately raises a ton of questions.
It really does. What's that? And that's exactly what we want to get into today.
Yeah.
The power of really raw, honest expression, and what it does to us. Because let's be honest, isn't that what we're all kind of searching for? Those aha moments that actually mean something?
Absolutely. And Pinkwart gives us this really potent metaphor. The garlic mirror.
The garlic mirror. Okay.
Yeah, his argument is that texts shouldn't be like watered down self-help guides that just keep us comfortable but maybe detached from reality.
Right, the self-help hell, he calls it.
Exactly. Instead, they should act like these garlic mirrors reflecting uncomfortable truths, unflinchingly directly, not leading us into some kind of escapist fantasy. That's really the core concept we're digging into.
Okay, so let's go back to that initial scene for a second. The details.
Yeah.
The backstage setting, the undone pants, the slashed throat, that pervasive garlic smell, the mic.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And then you have that cynical comment from the investigating officer about a pseudo-poet selling his soul problems for a bit of applause. You immediately feel that clash, don't you, between that surface judgment and the deeper personal truth hinted at by the note.
Definitely. It's like two worlds colliding right there. You've got the perhaps hardened, pragmatic view of the detective versus the potentially very internal, emotional world of the artist.
Yeah.
The comment might sound cynical, and maybe it is, but it could also reflect a kind of weariness or skepticism towards, very public displays of inner turmoil. But, and this is crucial, the note points towards something completely different, something much deeper.
Absolutely. And those final words, I survived everything, just not myself, paired with that mirrored text. It points so strongly to an internal struggle, doesn't it? Something that ultimately proved more fatal than any external threat.
Exactly. It shifts the focus away from some potential shadowy figure to the abysses within one's own psyche.
And that's where Pinkwart's idea of the garlic mirror really comes in, isn't it?
Precisely. Pinkwart says these kinds of texts should smell like truth, like guts and, like that overlooked garlic clove sitting in the kitchen, maybe getting a bit old, developing its own intense character.
He deliberately contrasts that with what he dismisses as self-help hell. Those vague cliches like love yourself or trust the universe.
Yeah, he's criticizing that superficiality, that avoidance of real, sometimes unpleasant self-confrontation.
And he gives some really concrete examples of what he does mean. He talks about how real texts expose those uncomfortable realities we all face. Like walking past a homeless person and not giving them money. Not necessarily out of stinginess, but maybe out of this vague fear about where the money might go, or that feeling of staying silent when you know you should speak up just because it's awkward.
Right, those moments of quiet compromise or dissonance.
For him, those truths are like garlic, potent, intense, sometimes a bit biting,
Exactly. It's about those moments where we aren't entirely honest with ourselves, or where social niceties make us gloss over uncomfortable truths. Pinkwart argues that engaging with these garlic moments in writing can be incredibly powerful.
Then comes that really provocative analogy about the condom.
Oh yeah, that one.
He says a text where nobody feels caught red-handed after 3 minutes is as useless as a condom at an ex's funeral. I mean, it's obviously hyperbolic.
Deliberately so, I think.
But it dramatically underscores this need for texts that actually do something to us. Maybe even make us squirm a little, or confront our own contradictions.
Absolutely. It's about creating a resonance that goes deeper than just, surface level entertainment or agreement. And the 3 specific examples of garlic texts he gives next really illustrate this point vividly.
Yeah, let's look at the first one. The family garlic. The mother who always smelled of unwashed clothes, not from cooking, but because of depression. And the narrator's later realization, after wearing the same undershirt for 3 days himself, thinking, so that's what non-living smells like. It's not a funny story, but like Pinkwart says, anyone who's experienced or witnessed something similar feels an immediate connection, a kind of painful recognition.
What's fascinating there is that sense of authenticity. It's not about big, dramatic events. It's often these small, seemingly mundane details that suddenly reveal a profound emotional truth. It's recognizing something we might have felt or seen, but never really articulated or understood.
The second example, the rotten relationship, is also really sharp. The boyfriend hates garlic, and the narrator keeps sneaking it into his food because she can't bring herself to end things directly.
So the risotto becomes this passive-aggressive breakup note.
Exactly. Pinkwart doesn't call it a text. He calls it a hit job.
Yeah.
He thinks that kind of unvarnished, maybe even slightly devious honesty should have a place in slam poetry.
You see how unspoken conflicts and fears get communicated in this subtle yet really effective way. The garlic becomes a symbol for the toxic atmosphere, for everything that isn't being said openly but is still poisoning things.
And finally, the stage as confession. The unhappy marriage, the apartment smelling of spoiled food, fear, and everyday lies, and the narrator staying just because of the aioli.
Painful, but brutally honest.
That line at the end, know thyself or die. It's harsh, but maybe necessary, right?
It's such a stark portrayal of self-deception and the inertia of habit. The aioli, that little supposed delicacy, becomes this bitter joke, a comforting facade in an otherwise bleak reality. It's a powerful image for the small lies or comforts we cling to, even when they're not good for us.
But Pinkwart's clearly fed up with what he calls these cute little verses about hope, sparkle, gender neutrality, and mental health. Things that sound nice but don't really stir anyone up.
He compares them to a weak tea light in the wind, pretty but ultimately powerless.
His critique seems to be that a lot of modern slam, in his view, stays in a kind of comfort zone. It might touch on important topics, but often in a very general, safe way that doesn't really challenge the audience or push for that deeper, maybe uncomfortable engagement.
Right, it avoids the garlic, essentially.
So his alternative, he says, to crush your own fear like a garlic clove, wait 10 minutes, really inhale that intense smell, and then just let out everything you'd normally never dare to say. Not, he claims, for shock value, but because, in his view, it's the only unadulterated truth left.
It's about that raw, unfiltered emotion that emerges when you confront your deepest fears and truths and try to put them into words. It's an act of self-exposure, maybe, but that's precisely what can create that profound connection with an audience, because it's not about polished words, but about real, often painful experience.
And then he mentions the poetry master. He describes it as an electric shock to the language center of the cowardly little artist's soul.
Intriguing phrase.
Yeah. A tool, maybe, or perhaps an attitude, for writing texts that aren't just consumed but felt deeply. Texts that can, metaphorically speaking, turn garlic into a bomb. What do you think he means by that?
My interpretation is that it's about channeling that raw honesty into a linguistically powerful form, something that has maximum impact on the audience. It's not just about telling the truth, but shaping it, crafting it so it really lands, maybe even shakes things up a bit.
And then, right at the end, Pinkwart circles back to that image of aioli and challenges us, the readers, to ask ourselves, what are you still hiding?
It's a very direct challenge, isn't it? An invitation for some serious self-reflection.
Yeah, definitely. It's urging us to be honest with ourselves, to question what uncomfortable truths we might be sweeping under the rug in our own lives and maybe in what we choose to engage with.
So let's try to summarize the key takeaway here. It seems to be about the immense power of unfiltered, honest expression, which can sometimes be as intense, maybe even as unpleasant as the smell of garlic.
Right. His idea is that texts should function like mirrors, reflecting back at us even the less pretty, the uncomfortable aspects of our reality, directly and without flinching.
And that's relevant for anyone listening because at its heart, it's about developing a deeper understanding of ourselves and maybe the world around us. Engaging with uncomfortable truths, whether it's in art or just in our own lives, can lead to, well, multi-layered and genuinely authentic insights.
It's about having the courage to look, isn't it? Even when it's difficult.
Precisely. Even when it smells a bit like garlic.
Okay, so to leave everyone with a final thought, inspired by Pinkwart's ideas, think about a time you might have chosen a comforting escape room, a situation or explanation where you felt safe and validated instead of potentially facing a revealing garlic mirror. A mirror that might have shown you a perhaps uncomfortable, but ultimately more direct truth. What might that garlic have revealed in that situation? Something to ponder.